Welcome to Exploring Axon, a podcast where we discuss Axon Framework, Axon Server, and their ecosystem. I am your host and the producer of this podcast, Sara. This is the first part of my conversation with Shopey Mossavar-Rahmani about working at a large Swedish furniture company's legacy system that was built in 1985. We discuss the challenges of still working with this system, why it hasn't been fully replaced, and how the efforts of moving some of the logic to other systems with better designs have been for him and his team. We talked about ways to get other team members and at times the management onboarded on using cutting-edge patterns, tools, and technologies, as well as the learnings that came along with it. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and please do join me for the second part in the next episode when we talk more about how Axon products have helped Shopey and his team in their efforts to move to faster and more reliable systems, as well as the topic of communication in large teams. Now let's have a listen. Hi, Shopey. Thank you so much for joining me today, and welcome to the show. Could you please introduce yourself to everybody and tell me a little bit about your background?
Hi, Sara. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast. My name is Shopey, as you mentioned, and I have been working as a software engineer for, let's call it a global company, mainly working with retail. And they're quite famous in the furniture area. But I think we can kind of describe the company a bit more as we go along. But my background has been in various kind of roles. I've been working as a CTO in a startup and had various roles such as Scrum Master, Project Manager, various test engineer roles, software engineer roles, and now lately I just call myself software engineer without
Awesome.
no tags and names.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes they get a bit confusing and too many, I guess, responsibilities come in, and you're kind of like, which hat do I put on, and what do I call myself? So that's totally cool, software engineer. And I think you have done a lot of work in terms of the design of various systems and sort of having the role of an architect in many situations as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. So yes. So lately I'm going back maybe 12 years. I've mainly worked as a software architect in various levels, as a solution architect, domain architect, transformation architect, IT, technology architect. There's many architects.
Yes,
so
you've done them all.
I've done them all.
Fantastic. So in this particular company that you've been working for some time now, there is a main system that actually takes care of one of the biggest business related aspect of the company. And I'll let you talk more about that. Can you tell us a little bit about what this one big system does? Or maybe I think it's one application. I think it's a monolith, right? That's been running since the 80s. It's obviously a legacy system. And can you tell everybody a little bit about how this application is being used within this retail organization? What does it do? And has it been working flawlessly? And so just kind of a little bit of background and general information.
Sure. So to be accurate, there is, I think, 4 systems in play right now as of today.
Okay.
So in 1985, somebody had an idea. Let's use technology for solving a problem. Usually you would throw people at it and spreadsheets and paper, right?
Yeah.
So back then, personal computers were not mainstream. So it was a bleeding edge idea to use computers to solve. Basically, what we're dealing with here is order management. The company was growing quite rapidly, and they wanted to be able to scale And then they kind of went into solving the problem by reaching out to various vendors and so on. And somebody came up with the idea, let's use software.
Mhm.
So then they built this first embryo of an order management system, creating orders, stock management, and a bunch of things like that. Um, the specific kind of OS back then for this was VMS, which is a very awkward one. Doesn't have a file system the way you would think a normal file system works. It has basically an iterative. Um, it's just a flat structure of files. It doesn't have any depth to it, and yeah, it's a bit complicated. But anyhow, the solution has been there, and it has been adding features have been added since then until today. People have
Wow.
been adding new features to it. At some
Yeah.
point, it was written in Pascal, and then I think in 10 years ago, this was converted to C++ with some conversion tool. And since then, it's been growing. There was multiple attempts to kill it off. So, and they all failed. And what they instead did was they add more complexity. So let's call this System A. And System A has been there since 1985.
Mhm.
I joined this company around 2006, and there was a new idea that we should replace this with the .NET solution. .NET
Mhm.
was new in 2003, 2000 era, and
Mhm.
we need to do a modernization. We need to go away from the prompt look or feel of the application that this one had. System A was basically a DOS prompt.
Mhm.
And we need to make it more clickable. Um, so it looks nice and so on. So we started building that 2003. I joined on the actual project 2006. And
Mhm.
um, since then, the main idea of that project that was started 2006 was to replace the System A from 1985, and
Mhm.
same process repeated 2016, where we tried to replace the system that we built 2003,
Mhm.
and now I am in another project which is trying to replace them all. Uh, and
Okay. It
yeah,
seems like it's every decade you go back to it and you're like, can we just kill this thing
can we
for
just kill
one
this thing?
last time? Right? It's not happening.
So no, it's not happening, and it is. I mean, it's been carved out. So if you look at the 1995 solution, it was doing order management, returns, a whole bunch of things and activities around the sales, the stock,
Mhm.
the procurement, CRM. It was like SAP and or Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics plus order management plus all the things, everything in one kind of
Yeah.
solution. And so slowly, what we did is that we isolated out in 2003 solution the the part that had to do with orders, sales orders,
Okay.
and that took care of
Mhm.
that. But the stock management was still there in that old system, and
Mhm.
that branched out. And the 1985 solution is a kind of a funny one because it needs to be in every store, and we have around 500 stores plus
Yeah.
the web exposure. And for each of them, there needs to be dedicated old school 1985 platform running. It's quite expensive to make that work. And so, as you see, we try to replace this because the hardware is very specific, and it's not easy to get hold of, and it's very costly. and this company is paying the vendors to build it for them.
Wow.
Um, so
So kind of like go back in time and rebuild this thing that
yeah.
should have died 20 years ago, but it's still ongoing. So a couple of questions on that. So this specific company, I remember back in the 80s and 90s, the way that they did their ordering was that they would send out catalogs to people because obviously, as you mentioned back then, personal computers were not a thing in most households. So it wasn't like me just entering the URL and going to the website and put stuff in the shopping cart and then checking out and get those items shipped either to my house or just go and pick them up. So this particular system that was built back in 85, which I'm sure was extraordinary new age and, breaking all these barriers of just handwritten orders and things, was it the system that was used internally? Because if I remember, at the time you get the catalog, and um, I don't remember my family ordering from the catalog, like picking up the phone and calling this company and say, "Hey, we want order SKU number, blah blah blah. Can you send it to us?" Well, various reasons. At the time, the country I lived in did not have this company there. I still don't think they have it there. And the neighboring place that we used to oftentimes visit, the neighboring country that did have one of these stores there, um, didn't ship to where we lived. So if we wanted to purchase something, we'd have to go to the store and purchase it. Do you know at the time if they did have this kind of like phone ordering system, or did you still have to go to the store despite having the catalog? Do you remember that?
So I think it depends what type of customer you are, because
Hmm.
um, the ordering system has been there from the beginning. People tend to call the company for various reasons, but
Hmm.
for ordering as well. But it was not common for uh, private customers, if you want to call it that,
I see. Okay.
to order through mail orders or phone orders, something like that.
So it's
It
kind of
was
more like B2B, sort of
B2B
like,
scenarios,
uh-huh.
like
Okay.
exactly. Like a company starts out and they make a call, hey, we want 200 desks or something like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
That would go
Gotcha.
through that channel, and they would probably have some dedicated person taking care of that.
Hmm.
But it's funny that you touch on the catalog because that's also part of the system I spoke about.
Okay.
It's oh, we had an army of photographers and you know
I can
editors,
imagine because those
and
catalogs were big.
yeah, and it's a project. It was an army of people working,
Mhm.
and in my early years, we had a visit to that department, and it was a journey of its own.
Yeah.
So yeah, so all things are connected, and let's not forget about the restaurants. Uh,
Oh, right. Exactly. I mean,
and
it's such a huge organization that I think there's like layers upon
yeah,
layers upon layers. And you and I
there's
had a small conversation last week when
yeah,
you were talking about transportation and trucks and things like that too, which was
yeah. So there is
wow.
also there is the um, trucks that needs to be timed so that you don't put down big packages on the floor because it will occupy space, and yeah, you cannot move easily. So you have to make sure that you put down things from the shelf in the central storage, not talking about the stores, so that it can be packed into the trucks or the trains that would have dedicated kind of entry into the warehouse. A train would come in and stop, and it would be loaded with trucks, forklifts, and it needs to be kind of, oh, they cannot put everything down on the floor for the train because it's a lot.
Hmm.
And it also needs to be, I mean, software needs to guide the forklifts.
Hmm.
Which one should go first? Which one should go second? What is going on top of what? So that you maximize the volume and packaging. Everything costs money.
So this legacy system, well, at this point, legacy at the time, it was like shiny, beautiful new thing that was written in 85. Was it then only taking care of more specific ordering things, or maybe at the time, and then it spread? How did that kind of evolve?
Right. Yeah. So I think it started by just being able to maintain the number of orders coming in to get a grasp of what's been ordered and who wants what. how much of this do we have left. But then it slowly grew into a bit of a one tool for them all, like one tool to rule them all. But it was separated into smaller projects at some point, where, for instance, the warehouse storage and volume was its own kind of thing, still connected. I think the solution ended up having hundreds of integration to various things, and all was orchestrated through this tool anyway.
Hmm.
So you had different people working in different screens, doing completely different things. Let's
Hmm.
say returns was working in it, sales was working in it, but also stock replenishment and all those, and also vendor activities that you would have
Hmm.
for supply and so on. They branched out into their own projects, but then there was integrations from that to the main application to those sub solutions.
Hmm. So I think at the time, since this wasn't sort of a, so to speak, customer facing system in a lot of ways, because still at the time people would have to either come to an ordering location or calling the orders. Even if it's B2B, you still have telephones. I know, the thing of a past that you pick up and you actually speak to somebody. um, so I can imagine, even if there were hundreds of systems integrated with one another, if you wanted to do maintenance or if you wanted to do an upgrade or something like that, and you had downtime, it's not so crucial, in a sense that, oh, the system is down for 24 hours because we have to upgrade or do something with it, maintain it. It's not going to make a lot of customers angry, so to speak. But once the basically personal computers became more popular and people had them in their homes, and then you are able, as a customer, as an individual customer in this case, uh, to order things online and expect this system to behave properly, meaning back in the 90s, it's okay to wait 10 minutes for an order to go into process. Now people don't even want to wait 10 seconds because things have to happen quickly. And this system, as you mentioned, is still in place, and it's still, there's hardware that is being used inside of the stores as well. How do you manage the integration and downtime in this situation?
Yeah, so maybe explain a bit more about where we are situated in the world. So the project started in Sweden, in somewhere
Hmm.
called Älmhult, and it's a very small city, and it grew quite rapidly. So the downtime was not a problem as long as you were dealing with Europe. So we were scaling out to Europe. Everyone was sleeping at midnight, and time zones are not so um, different. It's just 1 hour difference to London from Sweden,
Hmm.
and maybe 1 hour plus minus is not a big deal. So we had. Yeah, it was not the fastest comparison to today's standard, the fastest machines that ran this solution. So we had roughly 6 hours of, let's call it, batch processing
Hmm.
at after 2 o'clock a.m.
Okay.
So it would run for 6 hours, and sometimes that would break, of course.
Okay, of
And
course.
what would happen is that then people will start to come into the stores, and we would detect it at that point.
Hmm.
And um, it is, it's a big pain when this is down, because the queues are long,
Yeah.
and there are this. Back then we had cashiers doing all these transactions for people, checking and scanning and stuff, and the queue would be like very very long, and they would be online with us, and the calculation was that for every hour, roughly 1 million euros would be lost in today's
Oh, wow.
standard. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you had that as a support or third line. You saw the numbers ticking, uh,
Hmm.
and
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 blood pressure's going up.
blood pressure going up, and everyone is kind of waiting for you to solve the problem. and there would be managers upon managers asking you questions while you were trying to solve a very difficult problem. So it was a fun, at the same time not so fun, but that would be.
Right.
But it worked for a while. I mean, for Europe, that was not a problem. We had no issues whatsoever. But then we rolled out to Asia Pacific, that is Australia, Japan, and then to the right-hand side of Europe, you have North America. We learned a couple of interesting lessons there. One of them is that, well, you cannot, everybody is not sleeping at 2 a.m. That was one of them. And also that distances are different in North America. So,
yeah, of course.
So in Sweden, most things are in the same time zone, but in North America, you have the support being in one time zone, the central storage in a different time zone, the customer in a third time zone, and the backend solution in a fourth time zone. And all these had to work together, and the batch could not run, of course. We tried it, but
I love that you tried it. Yeah. You're like, let's give it a go and see what happens.
Give it a go. Maybe this hour would work. But no, it was not a solution. So I think that kind of led us into this 2003 modernization era, where the solution still had some dependencies on this 1985 solution, and it's need to be there because we had to do integrations, and it had a lot of features that the new solution did not have. So some of the, let's call it, order flows would run through the old system, but then that system would be down at certain hours, and we had to deal with that. Then we kind of built offline modes and a whole bunch of other complexities that where we try to mitigate these issues. And I mean, then back then, speaking of deploys and downtimes, I don't think there was any good culture around deploying so that you don't break the environment. It was just like, yeah, push it out and let's see what happens.
I think it was expected at the time that something's going to break, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there, right?
Right. So, I mean, people were editing in production. I remember and in one specific episode, I have done a very big mistake, and I still remember it. And that was, I was trying to fix a problem in production by a bit. It was a very bad one where I ordered 20. I think it was beds or lamps. It was like huge objects to my mother, and and I sent it to the post office for the King of Sweden. And it was delivered to the postal office of the king, and they called up my mother and said, you have a delivery. Yeah, you have a delivery. And it was so my mother was shocked. She called me and it's like, it's from your company. What is happening? Like, and I was like, oh no. And yeah, it was sorted out. And so then we learned.
I like that the whole process went through from ordering until receiving, and then the problem was detected then.
So it was it was a fun one, and so you learn a lot of patterns. So we have different modes. I mean, this is very long time ago. Nobody does this kind of mistakes nowadays, I hope. But I mean, so some of the screens we made intentional that if you are connected to production, we would put some kind of watermark on the application that would remind the developers, hey, you are in fact doing something in production.
Right.
Nowadays, I don't think we are that connected to production the same way we were before. So we've learned a lot of lessons on how to approach that. So at least we're progressing, I would say.
That's great. I hope you enjoyed the first part of our conversation. Please join me next time for the second part when we talk about Axon products and communication in large teams. Until then, I hope you have a great time and happy coding!